Hey, this is Passy from Passy's World of ICT, the guy with the white hat. And today we're having a look at a Visual Basic Programming lesson on rectangle and perimeter, a little app to calculate that. And we'll be looking at reviewing how to do drop-down list combo boxes, learning how to do radio buttons so we can select with them and put them inside a group box, and also revisiting validation to make sure that input that goes into our program is good and that it all works and nothing bad happens. So let's get started. Okay, so in this lesson we're creating the rectangle and area perimeter calculator that's going to be radio buttons with a group box and also drop down lists. And so it's going to look like this. Now, we're going to have radio buttons, so you can choose to here calculate the area with this radio button circle that you click in, and it'll give the area answer. But if you choose perimeter instead and hit the calculator button here, it's going to do the perimeter area. Okay, now ours is in, not a perimeter area, perimeter, sorry, is the distance around the object. And look, if you're in the USA, just use inches, feet, yards, miles, okay? Because ours is metric here in Australia. We're doing millimeters, centimeters, kilometers, and so on. But you just change it to your units, and you can easily change the code and what's on the form to do that if you're in the USA. And that will all be fine. So probably what we should do is just jump across and have a look at this calculator and how it works. Now, to do that, we just need to jump across here, and then let's get that on a nice background. Okay, and zoom in and have a look. So the idea is that you can enter a length. So let's just enter 3, and that the width is 2, and we can choose the unit. So this is in centimeters, and this is in centimeters. Let's do the perimeter first. So we'll just click the perimeter radio button and click calculate. And it's given us an answer there that the perimeter is 10 centimeters. Okay, now we can easily just change that over to area with our radio button here. Click area instead and calculate the area. And the area multiplies the two values, 3 times 2. And because we had units of centimeters here, our area answer is in square centimeters. Alrighty, now as well as that calculate button, we've also got a clear button where we can clear the form and all the values disappear so that we can do another one. Let's do 10 by 1. And let's do that in kilometers, okay? And we'll just do an area and click calculate. All right, now, if things are left blank, we're also going to have like this validation. So it'll say, make sure you enter values for both the length and width. So the program can notice something's missing there. And if we do, say, one in kilometers and the other one in meters, like this, and click calculate, it picks up on that mismatch, that it can't do it if one's in kilometers and one's in meters. So the units of length and width must be the same as the error message. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of validation we have to do in this program as well. And why do we have a tennis player there? Well, that's a photo we took in our side business, Photos by Passy at the Australian Open Tennis. And look, on a tennis court, there's lots of rectangles that divide up the court. And there's the kind of the distance of the white paint around the edge of that rectangle, and that's kind of a perimeter. And then the blue box that's enclosed by these white lines, the area of that particular blue box where he's standing on the court, that would be a specific area that has to be an exact standard size for it to meet international competition regulations. So, you know, the people that build these courts and make the lines, they've got to really understand area and perimeter. And that's why we got the tennis player in there, because it's just more interesting to have a picture on the app, that's all. All right, so let's get back to what we're doing here. And this rectangle calculator application, how we're going to build this app. All right, so first up, let's just do maths revision on calculating rectangle area and rectangle perimeter. Okay, so perimeter is just the total distance round the outside of this shape. So how long is that red line there, which is going around the outside of this shape? Well, it's 7 plus 12 is 19. And then over here, we've got another 7 plus 12 as well. So it's kind of two lots of 7 plus 12 is how long all that red would be around the outside here. So it's 2 times length plus width. So if you put the numbers in and work that out, it's 38 meters all the way around the outside of that blue rectangle. And that's the idea of perimeter. It just has single units here, like meters, centimeters, millimeters, or inches, feet, and yards if they're in the USA. And getting onto the area is, this time we take the length, the 12 here, and we multiply it by 7. Area is how many little yellow squares could fit in this big rectangle. So if we had to like stick down little yellow post-it notes or something to fill this in, how many of those little square yellow post-it notes would it take? And you can actually get a ruler and rule this up like grid paper on a graph and count them up. But look, there's maths formulas to do it, like length times width. It turns out the answer would just be 12 times 7, 84 of those little squares there. So it's 84 M2, which means square meters, okay? So that's just a revision of perimeter and rectangle, because obviously when we're testing our program, we need to kind of calculate the answers ourselves with old school mathematics like this to check that our app's actually giving the right answers, because it's not going to be a good app for people if it gives the wrong answers, obviously. Okay, so we'll get the user to choose whether they're doing perimeter or rectangle. Okay, look, the app could just easily give both answers, the perimeter and the rectangle, but we wanted to use radio buttons inside a group box and introduce that as some new learning in this lesson, so we're doing it that way. Now, when you build an app like this, it's got a lot going on in it. So you build it in stages. It's too overwhelming to build the whole app just sitting down doing one session of mega coding, even though you see guys in YouTube videos do that. But you need to break the task down into what we call versions or stages. And it's just like writing a book. Like before someone writes a book, they plan out, okay, we're going to have 10 chapters and each chapter is going to be about specific things, and they plan each chapter separately. They kind of have versions of the book. The first version is when the first chapter's finished. Then they might write the next chapter and you've got chapters 1 and 2 at that stage. So they build it up gradually. Someone doesn't sit down at a computer and just go, right, today I'm smashing out this ebook I'm going to sell on the web, and just type it up non-stop, right? Everything's done in stages, and it's best we do our programs the same way. So let's have a look at the pseudocode here. Basically, we're just going to need the user, as we saw in that demonstration, to put in the length and width. And then on the radio buttons, if they've picked perimeter, well, we use that perimeter maths formula, 2 times length plus width, which has a star in it when we're doing computers and coding it in Visual Basic in most languages. And then we need to just tell them what the perimeter answer is, output that answer on. Otherwise, they might have clicked in the area little round circle radio button, and then we do length times width and tell them what the answer is, okay? So we're going to do all that by them putting in the information, pick and click whether they want to do perimeter or area with the radio button, and then hit the calculate button on the app, and it's going to calculate the answer. Now, in this first version, we're not worrying at all about validations or putting the units on the answer. So putting square centimeters on an area answer or something like that, or square feet or square inches. That's later. That's in a later version you do that. You don't try and do too much all at once. We're also going to kind of make some mistakes along the way just to show you a few things as well. So that's part of building something. Like you build it a little bit, test it, and then that might be wrong. But the good thing is you can fix that up before you go on to the next version and the next part of the program. So the first thing we need to do is get this form built. And in the video description, you can get that picture, that tennis picture if you need it, or or just any old picture you want to use actually. So we need some things on here. So the important things like these labels, a label that just has a heading rectangle calculator, right? You've seen that in previous lessons we've done. That's not really an important thing. The program's not going to alter that. That'll just sit there staying the same the whole time. But the important things are we need a text box where they can put in the length. So that's going to be called txt input length using Hungarian and camel case notation, which you should be familiar with now from our course. And a text box to put the width in over here. You'll need a group box here, which is going to enclose the 2 radio buttons. The reason you put them inside a group box is that way they can only pick and click one of them. They can't click more than one. So we just put it inside a group box. and set the group box text to choose one, and that'll make that choose one appear there. Then these two radio buttons need to be called special names because we're going to refer to those special names in the program code. So they need to be opt perimeter and opt area. Then we just need a calculate button, btn calculate, a couple of text boxes here, text perimeter and text area. Okay, strictly speaking, we should probably have used labels here and given them a white outline border so that users can't type into them. But we're just going to figure the user is going to use common sense. They're just going to put this stuff in and calculate, and they'll look at the answer and they won't try typing in these boxes. But probably we should have made them labels. But anyway, they're going to be text boxes for what we're doing here. So yeah, as we discussed, the competition tennis court, there's a series of rectangles and they've got to be the exact standard sizes. So that's why we got the tennis picture there. Because when we had our students do this program and showed it to them, they're all going, oh, why is there a picture of a guy playing tennis there? What's that got to do with programming? All right, it was just something to have on there to make it a little bit more interesting. All right, the actual coding for version 1. So ascend the mountain in stages. They don't start off on day 1 at the bottom of Everest and then just sort of climb up the top in a day. Although a friend of mine just did the climb of Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, which I never did when I was over in Africa, but he's gone back to Africa and done it. And yeah, that I think is a whole day thing. You kind of hike, you sort of get up to one stage, I think, then you just do this mega hike where you go all day and all night so that you can get to the top and then sit down at the top and watch the sunrise, which looked totally awesome from his photos. But something bigger than that, a bigger mountain like Everest, they do it in stages with base camp. So we do our program the same. Now what we do is first we just worry about the input. So we've got those two text boxes on the form. So we're going to have some program variables, a DBL, a double, so that we can input decimal values as well as whole numbers. Okay, so that's going to be called the input length, and we're going to have a DBL variable called input width, and we're just going to get what they've typed into the text box and use this casting, which we've covered in previous lessons, to convert it into a number, which can get stored in DBL input length. All right, so you just code that first bit, and then you can just run your program with the green arrow up the top and test it. Okay, can they just put a couple of numbers in the text boxes, and does that work? Good. All right, then we can go on to the next thing. Now, the next thing we need to do is check which radio button's been selected, because if you remember back to the pseudocode, if they've picked the perimeter one, we need to do 2 times length plus width, but if they've picked area, we need to do length times width. So that can just be done with an if statement. So we just have if opt perimeter, that was the name of that radio button. If that's been clicked in, well then the checked property of it will be true. So you go opt perimeter.checked. So this is how you check a radio button on a form to see if the users actually click that selection. Use .checked equals true. Well then let's do the perimeter formula and put that answer that we get, the DBL perimeter value, out into the answer text box on the form. And if they've chosen the area one, well, then if that's true, then do the same sort of thing, length times width, and put the answer out into the text box on the form. Now, these little vertical lines here, that's just where we had the cursor sitting when we did the screenshot. It's not something you type in. Probably should have got rid of that, but we didn't have time or didn't see it there. So test the program, it should run okay. The only thing is that if you've just done a perimeter run, it'll still have the old stuff hanging around when you do an area run straight afterwards, because we haven't got the clear button working yet. So we need to add in something just to clear it out. So if they've just done an area calculation, the area answer will be down the bottom. Let's just show it to you on the program. It's probably the easiest thing. Picture's worth 1,000 words. So we have got the clear button on this one. So let's say they just done, okay, they just put in some stuff here and they just done a perimeter one and we calculate it. Now, if we change over to area and click calculate, what'll happen is the area answer will go on the bottom here, but this perimeter one's still hanging around, which isn't good because they asked for area, not for perimeter. But in this one, we've got the clearing out happening. So that's the code we're looking at adding in to clear it out. And if they swap to perimeter and go calculate, notice the area one disappeared. So it just clears out old answers before you calculate a new answer. So you don't get both answers showing at once down the bottom here, because that answer could be for different number values too, which would make it really confusing, all right? So let's just go back to our presentation. So we just have clear out the old values, just set text perimeter.text equals nothing. Okay, that's a way of filling it up with spaces or emptiness so that it's empty, and text area.text equals nothing. Okay, so that will then clear them out as we were talking about, and that completes version 1 of our program. All right, so we don't have the inputting of the units yet, and we don't have a clear button or an exit button, which will all come later on, and we don't have any validation input checking yet either. But that's the basic version, so that's good. That's kind of like getting to base 1 on Everest, and now we're ready to sort of have a little bit of a rest and then go to the second part. So yeah, if you want to try code this first bit and then come back to the video, that's fine. And let's move on to looking at the clear button is the next thing we're going to do. All right, so the clear button, as we saw, just clears everything off the form so we can do a new calculation without having to exit the application and restart it again. So we just need to make a clear button. The easiest way to do it is to actually click on your calculate button and just go Control-C to copy it, and then go Control-V, move the copy over here into position. That way everything's the exact same size and neat. And just change the text property in the name of this one to say clear instead of calculate, and change its name to BTN clear, okay? So that'll just set up our form. Quick, easy, copy and paste the calculate button, we're ready to go, and we've got a clear button called BTN clear. All right, so you just need some program code. Now this is very standard code, and the first time you look at it, you'll go, what, me? It's talking about me dot controls, and what's that all about? And there's a for each and a next, and looks very complicated. What it basically does is it just dims this variable a as a control variable. So it's looking for control variables, things on the forms which are sort of text boxes and things like that. And it says for each a in me.controls. Okay, me refers to the form. So the current form the program's on is called me. So instead of saying in form1.controls, we just say me.controls. So it's talking about whatever controls are on the form. If that type of control happens to be a text box, then set its text to be nothing. So it's just going to clear out the text boxes for us for the input length and width, and for the area answer and the perimeter answer. And we just say for each one. So it just keeps repeating this, going around the form looking for text boxes and clearing them out. So it'll find the length text box, clear it out, and then it says, is there another control? Yep, there is. There's another one right under here, the width one, and it clears it out. Now, to reset the radio buttons, we need to just set that their dot checked property is false, okay? Because that means they're not clicked in. So that will clear everything on the form and enable you to do another program run with different values. So we check that out, and that should work all right. Now let's look at the exception processing, all right? The things that could go wrong. So what could happen is the user could sort of put in their 5 and 4 and think, yep, I'm ready to go, and hit calculate, expecting they'll see perimeter and area answers here, but nothing happens, and they can just sit there clicking calculate, 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 and nothing happens. And they might be thinking, oh wow, what's wrong with the program that's not working? So it's not a real problem. It's not going to make a program crash or anything like that, like we've seen in previous lessons, but it could be annoying for them that they'd sit there clicking calculate going, damn this program, it doesn't work. I've put values in and nothing's happening. All right, so where we've got that thing to check which radio button they've clicked at the moment, and we've got if it's perimeter, otherwise it could be area, just to add an else onto the end here for the situation like we can see on this screen here, the picture we've got where they haven't clicked a radio button yet, but they're trying to click that calculate button. So just have a message box pop up. Please select either perimeter or area. That's what the message box will say. And the heading up the top of the box is going to say choice missing. All right, so we'll have a look at that, and this is how it runs. So they've put in their 12 and 10, they're clicking the calculate button and nothing's happening. and the message will come up straight away. The first time they click that calculate, it'll say choice missing as the heading, because that's what we had on the end of the coding, and please select either perimeter or area. Okay, so hopefully I'll look at this and go, oh, right, I'm supposed to click in one of them, fix that, calculate, then they'll all be good to go. So that's sort of called UX, user experience, and that's making your application user-friendly. And there's even jobs now in IT being a user experience specialist, or part of your role might be kind of, you know, website optimization, search engine criteria, and UX. You might be kind of in charge of doing the UX for a company or the app or whatever. Now, things can happen that are worse than that, which is the bad input crash. All right, so you might think, who would ever type in words, which are longer to type than numbers anyway, and not type in the number 2 and 4? Okay, some people, maybe they like English and books and reading and writing, so they just want to put in, okay, 2's TWO in English, 4's FOUR, I want to do perimeter, and click calculate. Now this will cause a major program crash, all right, because when you do that sort of thing, what will happen is you'll just get this exception error and everything will grind to a halt. Because when it tries to do the CDBL conversion, as we've seen in previous lessons, what happens is it says, hang on, there's ain't no number digits in here. There's just some letters of the alphabet, and I can't turn that into 1010 type binary stuff I can do anything with. So it just stops and says, nope, no good, not doing it. Right, so when that happens, when you get a crash, if you need to stop your program, see where there's that green arrow up the top we use for running programs, just hit that red stop button and that will stop the program, okay, if you have one of these crashes. Now we've got to fix this by adding validation onto the inputs so that we can sort of chop them off after people have put in a 2 or a 4, say, hey, you got to put in number digits, that's no good, and stop it getting down into the program code and crashing. All right, so page 3 of the Word doc step-by-step instructions has this. So let's just go over to the Word document, which is here. Okay, so if you get the Word document which goes with this lesson, and this is in the video description, the link there will take you to our website. Now this one is a paid lesson because it's got a lot in it, but the cost of the materials is like less than getting kind of a hamburger and fries from McDonald's. It's really cheap, guys. And your teacher may have already bought these lessons anyway. So your teacher or instructor, check with them first because they may well already have the lesson. So this sort of gives you some very detailed step-by-step instructions. And we're looking at version 2 and doing the input validation, and we're on page 7. And I'll just check over in here. Was that the page we were actually supposed to be on? No, it says check for page 3 in the Word doc. Okay, well, let's check that out. Page 3. So we're only up to page 3. That doesn't seem okay. Page 1, page 2, page 3. Okay, page 3 is where it's doing the calculation code. I'm not thinking that's page 3. I'm thinking it should be page 7, where we're doing version 2 with the input validation code. Okay, let's just adding validation to the inputs. Let's change that. Page 7, I think, is going to work a lot better for that. Okay then. All right, off to page 7. Away we go. All right, so what we can do is we can have this variable called that the Boolean input data okay is true, all right? And what we're going to have here is checking some inputs. So we've got here if string is null or empty. So to check whether the width or length text box, in this case we're doing the length here, the first one, to check if they've just left that empty and haven't typed in, we say if that's null or empty on that text input length text box, then just pop up a message box that's going to tell them enter values for both the length and width. And the heading up the top of that error box will just say error. Okay, and then we go into all these else if. So else if they haven't put the width in because that's null or empty, tell them to put in values for length and width. Then check, is it numeric? So this is a problem we're having with the program crash. So if the length, if that's false, so if they type in FOUR for 4, that's going to be false, and it's going to pop up this message box and tell them to fix it. So it won't go on further in the code down to this yellow section and try and do the CDBL and crash, because we've intercepted it here with a message box that pops up telling them to fix it. Now we've kind of put this into a do until loop, all right? But when we test that, validation checking here, which is all in blue, we get a problem, okay, where the program will just stay stuck in the loop and you can't close the message box that's come up telling the error. And this is known as an infinite loop, and you have to press that red stop button we just showed you before to get out of that. Okay, so we need to make sure that we actually don't need the loop, because our program's event driven, which automatically creates looping. Now this is a little bit tricky to get your head around, but that calculate button kind of makes an event where it'll try keep doing the calculating. So you don't actually need a loop to tell it to keep doing calculating, because the user can keep attempting calculating just by clicking the calculate button. Okay, so you don't put a loop in there for your validation. All right, if you don't understand that, just believe me, don't code loops for validation. We just need the if, else, if statements. All right, so here's the validation, what it looks like. So we're setting that the Boolean input data okay value is false, that the input data isn't okay. So Boolean values are true, false. So at the moment it's false, it's not okay. We do all our checks here, and at the bottom we have an else. So if none of these checks fail, so if they haven't left them blank and they haven't typed non-number things into the boxes, well then everything's good to go. So none of these will be true. We won't get any message boxes pop up. And when they click calculate, we're ready to go. So we just set Boolean input data okay to true. Then we make sure that we don't go and try and do these calculations unless, so we put if Boolean data okay is true, so we know it's kept going through these checks until it hit that it was true. So unless it's true, unless it passed all those checks, we're not going to go ahead and try and cast our doubles and do our calculations, all right? So this code is in the document, and things have gotten complicated really quickly. So this is kind of your 80-20 rule. Okay, that the 80% of programming now to get the thing working nicely, to cater for all the silly inputs and things that people could do to your program, that's going to kind of take a lot more effort than it was to get the original one going. This might take 80% of your work time just to get the last 20% of the program finished. All right, and that's just the way it is. Validation takes a while, but we're going to do a whole nother lesson on validation, which explains it in a lot more detail and gives you a structured approach you can use every time you need to write a program, because any programs where there are user inputs, or even people just picking and clicking things on the screen, not even typing silly things in like TWO and FOUR, you still need validation, all right? So this Word document we've been looking at, you can go to the link in the video description and that'll show you how to get it. And like we said, it's only like, I think less than $2 US to get this. So probably less than a hamburger at McDonald's to buy, and it's well worth buying and getting that to follow along with. So we're now up to making version 3, and we better see where we're up to in our presentation, because we've done all that fixing the bad input data. And now we're up to version 3, where we're going to do some modularization, as it's called. All right, so our program we just flicked through and showed you for version 2 had gotten quite long and complicated with all that validation stuff in it. So this is where we need to kind of break things down into steps and modularize them. It's a bit like sort of if you have a recipe for cooking something, especially I like cooking Indian curries. They're really nice, and Asian Thai curries and things, but they have like a separate little sort of set of steps for making the curry paste and getting the spices and grinding them all up and doing all of these things. So that's kind of a separate module just for making the curry paste. And then there'll be another module about sort of getting whatever meat you're using and preparing it, and vegetables as well, or maybe you're vegetarian, just doing the vegetables. So it'll have all this stuff about how much of each of these things you need. You've got to chop them all up and get them organized. And then it'll kind of have another module that once you've got your paste ready, you've got all your bits and pieces chopped up, then you can put the wok on and turn the heat right up. On a gas stove works well. Put a little bit of oil in. Then you can do your kind of frying, which is the last bit, which is really quick. Although for some curries you might leave them kind of simmering for hours after that to really get the flavor infused later on. But anyway, I got totally sidetracked there. But yeah, it's like that in a recipe. You don't just read a recipe, it just has lines and lines of stuff to do. They usually break it into sort of sections and different subtasks that you do. And that's what we need to do our program. So we need to have one that just does the validation, kind of we're doing all that, like making our curry paste. And then when that's all sorted and organized, then we can go on and do other things like actually do the calculations and then finally show what the answers were on the screen. So this is a pretty typical thing called IPO, input, processing, and then output. And all our programs are pretty much going to follow this same kind of main processing formula. A lot of the programs we're going to do in the course, you're going to first set that, okay, I don't know what my input data is like or what they've picked and clicked on the screen, so I'm just setting that to false. It's not okay at the moment. I'm going to do a validation checking of the whole form to make sure everything's okay before I go off and try and convert anything to doubles or process anything and have a big bad program crash. So it's only if the input data is okay here, only if this equals true, that I'm going to go off and do calculations and then show them the output on the screen. Okay, so dividing it up like this is called making subroutines or making submodules. Okay, now as soon as we modularize, we're going to need some global variables. And this is something new in this lesson and might be a bit tricky to get your head around first time we do it. But, you know, just try a bit at a time to understand. And by 2 more lessons from now, you'll just be going, oh, global variables. Yeah, sure, that's easy. But this won't be easy first time, I can tell you. So we've got our first kind of data flow diagram here, which is something we haven't done before. But we're looking, what are the main processes in our program in this blue box? So the whole thing is triggered by the event where someone clicks on the calculate button, then things start happening. Now, when they click on that, what's going on? Well, hopefully we've got something in the text box for the length, something in there for the width. They've picked either the perimeter or area option, and because we need to check whether things are okay, we've also got that Boolean thing, that input data okay. Is it false or is it true at the moment? And at the start it'd be false because we haven't done any validation checking of our stuff yet. So anyway, we move along from that to checking out all the inputs, and this is very standard input, processing, output, IPO type processing, which a lot of our programs do. So we check it at all. Are they blank? Else if. Have they got letters in there when there should be numbers? Else if. Have they forgotten to click a radio button? All these kind of validation checks we do. If everything's okay, then we can actually convert stuff and we can get our input length as a double because we might have decimal values that people have put in, our width, and we've got our opt perimeter or area ticked. They're clicked OK by the user, so we finish validation. Boolean input data OK now is true, and we go on to do calculations. So it does the 2 times length plus the width, or the length times width if we're doing area. Does those little formulas. The output is where we put the answers onto the text box, and finally on the screen we'll see the text perimeter, text box answer, and the text area answer, and they will just be appearing on our form, and the process is done. Now, things we have to pass between the modules, Boolean input data OK starts out as false, but then this one will set it to true. And if it's true, then this process will get done. So these ones that are in blue here need to be global variables, because to calculate the perimeter, the calculations has to have the actual valid input length that this module decided was there on the form ready to go. So these have to be passed between routines and submodules. So they need to be called global variables. So our ones in blue are global variables. Now, why isn't everything global? Because we still need to know whether they've picked perimeter or area on the radio buttons. Why aren't they global? Well, anything that's just sitting on the form is accessible to any module anywhere in the program. So by default, those things are already global. Any module can get at them. But ones we're using inside our program, like DBL input length and Boolean input data OK, those ones will need to make global, all right? If you didn't understand this first time through today, that's okay. There'll be a lot more on global variables to come later in the course. How you do the global variables is you just up the top of your program, straight underneath form 1 is where you dimension these. So you don't dimension them down in a subroutine, you do them right up the top here, and we just set all of these up as doubles, except our Boolean one for if the data is okay or not is going to be true or false. Okay, and then we're ready to go underneath there of our subroutine that's going to be for when they click the calculate button. Now BTN calculate here, this is going to be the main subroutine, the main processor for our program. And now that we've modularized, this calculate button drives the rest of the processing. So we've done setting Boolean input data OK to false, and we do our input validation submodule, then it won't go on and do any of this sort of stuff here unless Boolean input data OK is true. So someone can sit there changing things, clicking the calculate button on the form as long as they like, but if Boolean input data stays false because there's still something wrong when validation checks for things, well then it's going to stay false, and so this can't get done. It's not till everything passes validation you get to that last else in the validation code that sets the Boolean input data OK to true, that this is going to see that, and then it's going to go, oh, right, everything's good to go, and it'll do the calculations and put out the output. Okay, so that's kind of it, and that kind of makes a loop that it's going to keep doing input validation until the Boolean OK flag comes up true, until the program sets that everything's ready to go. So we don't have to have a do while loop or an until loop or anything like that. It's kind of already done by the event driving off the BTN calculate, the calculate button that's on our form. So Visual Basic's an event-driven process. So the program code for these three subroutines, we need to jump across to pages 11 and 12 in the step-by-step guide. Hopefully this time we have got the page numbers correct, but let's just go and check that out here. Okay, so pages 11 and 12. All right, so there's where we went through the modules. We've done our global variables. We're breaking it up into validation subroutine, a calculations, and an output. So you code these as do input validation brackets, and then you need to create a private sub here. So we have a private sub now that we type this in, private sub, do input validation brackets. At the bottom of this, you will have to have an end sub, which is right down here in the code. Let's just take away that ribbon so we've got a bit more room here. And yeah, this is what happens with the input validation. So it's a fairly long module, it often will be. So first we're just checking, is the width or length for either those text box null or empty? If they are, just pop up a message box. And that'll be that. It's not going to go down and do any of these other options at all. It'll stop right here and just spit out the error message to them. But maybe the things have got stuff in them. If it's numeric, well then it'll pass these numeric checks without popping up any messages. And then we need to also check that they're greater than 0, okay? That's an important thing because we don't want to be doing negative numbers in this, trying to multiply -2 by +4 and get -8 for an area. That's impossible. So we also need to check, is our text input length text is what's in the text box less than or equal to 0? And if it is, show a message that you can't put in negative numbers. The numbers have to be greater than 0. And likewise, we don't want to try to do 0 times 0 for an area either. So yeah, if it's less than or equal to 0, we'll then put out the error and don't let it do any more processing until they fix that problem. Then we check if the radio buttons are ticked. If they've ticked on the radio buttons, well then that's A-OK. And finally, all of these will pass because we've got good data in, it's greater than 0, it's actually a number value and not letters of the alphabet. They've actually clicked on the radio button, so Boolean input data OK will be set to true. When that happens, back in the main processor, let's just jump back up to here, it's going to say, okay, Boolean input data now is OK, that's true. So it's going to do the calculation submodule and do the output submodule. So we need to write the procedures or sub-procedures for those modules. So do calculations is a simpler one. This is do calculations just here. That's the end sub. Let's just move that down just a little bit, just a little bit. So yeah, this subroutine, private sub, do calculations, brackets, and then make sure you've got an end sub, and make sure you follow this indenting too. We've tabbed all of those across, if you notice, to line them up. So it's just going to set that the text boxes for the answers are nothing at the moment. If they've checked the perimeters, this is the same code that we used to have, and we've just put it into a submodule instead, all right? So that's all A-OK, and we don't need to check that they haven't done a radio button in here because we've already done that in the validation submodule, okay? So if you've been following closely, in the last program we had another else here, but we don't actually need that this time because it's already been pre-done in validation. And then we can just go on and do our output module. So the output module is just going to say if they've clicked that they want to do perimeter in that radio button, well, let's just put our answer into the perimeter text box on the form so we can see it there on the form. Otherwise, they might have clicked the area one and we do it for area. Right, so then we've got our clear button stuff, which we had previously, and that's all there. And that's kind of that version of the program finished. All right, now the next thing we need to look at is setting the focus. All right. So anyway, that was modularization. That was a lot to take in, but you will be writing and developing this program. Hopefully you're following along with the lesson, and you might want to pause at this stage and go to the detailed step-by-step instructions. Just do that coding, get your program working up to this point and make sure everything's okay, and then just pause the video and come back to it. Something I think we forgot to mention was that the video has a timeline index in the description. So if you're coming back to this video later on, just because you wanted to remember how to do validation, you can look in the video description first and find out where was the part of the video we did validation. Just click on that in the index and it'll take you straight to that section of the video. All right, so pause now if you need to and cut some code and test it, and then come back again. All right, object focus. Now this is something that's kind of, you add on a nice touch for validation, a little bit extra, like sort of putting the cream on top of the dessert or whatever. So we can set the focus. So when an error happens, like if they've got something wrong with the input length, we can make it go to that text box. So when you first run the form, the focus here is just on the first thing on the form. So that's called having the focus. So whichever box or thing the cursor's resting on at the moment, or what is the next thing that's going to get done, that's called the focus, the current focus. Now how you set object focus is, this is all our validation stuff that we've already sort of coded. And so if an error has occurred on the width text box, then you put text input width dot focus. So focus is a property of that text box, and just tell Visual Basic, hey, take your cursor and focus it in and dump it into that text input width box, because we want the user to fix it and type into there. So every time we come up with an error and show the message box, okay, they click OK on the message box, and then we put a focus command of line of code in here. So because they got the length wrong here, let's just put the cursor into the length box all ready for them to fix it and type in the right error. Here they've messed up the width box, so focus it on the width. All right, and if you look at the step-by-step guide, it goes into more detail on this and shows you all of the other kind of focus code. So it's just one little line of code you're kind of adding into sections of the existing validation subroutine that we've got. And again, that's nice that we've modularized the program, because you only have to go to the do validation kind of part of the program to do all these changes. Whereas if we just left it as one big kind of slab of code all over the place, it might be a lot harder to look through and pick up all the places where you needed to add the focus in. So that's another new thing for this lesson, focus, and we'll be coming back to that in another lesson later on validation. All right, now we're ready to put the answer units on. So if someone puts in, say, meters, so we've got 8 meters and 1 meter here, and they want to find the area, it should do 8 times 1, multiply it, and the units are that it's going to be meters squared or square meters. So we're going to have it in the area here, put not just the 8 by doing 8 times 1, but it's also going to say square meters. So we're now ready to do the program coding, which is going to sort of put the square meters onto the end of the answers. And we're going to add drop-down lists here so that these units here, these new boxes we've got where they can pick and click the units, it's going to be a combo box. So when they click on that arrow, what happens is it drops down and gives them 4 options here. And if you're in the US, you can easily just change those options to inches, feet, miles, like we've said. And because we know what they've picked here, meters, we can also set up this in the program code to come out in square meters. So that's the next part we're looking at. Now, we did combo box drop-down list in our case lesson, which was the previous one before this. If you haven't done that lesson, or you've forgotten that lesson, remember, once you've got the combo box dragged out onto your form, go to its properties, and there's a property called items, and you click on the triple dots, and that opens up the expression builder where you can put what are the things you want to have in that combo box. So Americans here will be putting inches, feet, yards, and miles, whereas us metric people here in Australia, we've done millimeters, centimeters, meters, and kilometers. And then once you've got that in there, just click OK on the string collection editor, expression builder here, run your program, test it out, and then when you click on each of these down arrows, yep, you should get the 4 options which were edited into that items property. So that should all be good to go. Now, getting the actual answer units, before we do that, we've just added in, let's just go back up here, we've just added in 2 new fields or 2 new objects onto the form, 2 combo boxes here, one for the length and one for the width. Now, as soon as you add on new objects onto your form where people can put in input data, or in this case just picking and clicking, you're gonna need some more validation. All right, so we know you guys are getting to love validation and you want to do some more, so we're going to do some more on those combo box list boxes. So we need to put in some checking there, because they could just leave these blank and just go, yeah, I just want to do 8 times 1 and work out the area and just click calculate. And we can't do anything because we don't know whether it's millimeters or centimeters or kilometers, what it is. So because they've left these blank, or even if they just leave one of them blank, we're going to pop up a message, units not selected. Choose some units for your length in this case. So we'll get them to do the length first. All right, so they need to use that drop-down list and fix that up. Or what could happen is they might have measured 8 meters, but then have a width of only 1 centimeter. Now, we won't get the right answer, because for doing our calculations, we need to have these in the same units. Now, I'm not going to go into a detailed maths lesson about that, but they need to be the same. They both need to be meters or both need to be centimeters. So if they wanted a centimeter answer, they'd need to actually go, 8 meters. Well, that's 8 times, there's 100 centimeters each time you do a meter. That needs to be 800 centimeters times 1 centimeter. If they want to do it in meters, they'd have to make that 8 times, I think, 0.001 or something meters. Anyway, they've got to be the same. So if we spot that these are different with our validation coding, the units of length and width must be the same is the message box we're putting up. We're just calling it a units error. So yes, more validation, more fun with validation. So steps 2A and 2B on pages 15 to 16 of the step-by-step guide. And we'll just quickly have a look at that, because this video is getting very long. I think it might even hit the 1 hour. But we did that about setting the focus, and it shows you all the things you need to do focus on there in the guide document. We're adding on our combo box because we want to get those units. And in here it tells you, yeah, it's wrong if they put in different units and all that sort of thing. And here's the coding you need. So our combo boxes, remember, are called CBO. So if the CBO length units, selected items, so whatever they've selected in that combo box, less than greater than means that they're not the same. So if that's not equal to or not the same as the width units, then put out that error. So we just need another else if in our validation subroutine there to check out these guys are the same values, okay? And that's adding that, and then we'll need to also add something to make sure they don't leave both of those blank, that they've actually done their picking and clicking. So that's the code for there to check if either of those units.txt, what's in those combo boxes, is nothing at the moment, will then put out error messages. So you need to add that onto. Now we're ready to add units to the perimeter area. So we are getting near the end of this. It has taken a while, but this is a big program, but we're just doing it step by step in little pieces here. So yeah, we need to get these units on, like if they do 8 times 1 for perimeter, that'll be 8 plus a 1, well, would be 9, and then you got 2 of them because you got length and width on both sides of the rectangle, so 2 9s are 18. And because I chose meters here, it'll be meters, and here they've chosen meters again, but it'll be 8 square meters because they were doing an area. All right, so steps 3, 4, and 5 on pages 16 to 19 of the detailed step by step have got that. Okay, so there you are, create your perimeter. It's got the code for that. It's got the code for doing the area, how we can use the case statement, which we learnt in the previous lesson. That's why we did that previous lesson on case first before going into this lesson, so you'd have that pre-knowledge. So yeah, you can do all that coding there, and then we've got another little subroutine here we've got called do determine area units. So we've broken do calculations, got another little sub-process hanging off that for doing that. And then we've got our do output, and then everything will be kind of working and you'll be able to get answers. Okay, so there's just a couple more things I think to do until we're actually done with this. So anyway, you can go through the step-by-step guide, pages 16 to 19, get those units all happening on the answers. And the clear and exit buttons, there's some stuff in the guide about that. So you know, if you see the link in the video description, and this is a pay for information, so check with your teacher or instructor, because they may have already bought this course or parts of it, and they've got all the materials ready to give to you. So you don't have to log on with a PayPal account and buy anything at all. Your teacher's already got it for you. Now, I've had some emails about, oh, why do we have to pay for things? You know, the other stuff you gave us was free. Well, yeah, we did. We were very generous at the start of the course in those first 5, 6, maybe even 7 lessons. Yeah, it was all free stuff, but look, this is taking up a lot of our time, and the price we're asking you to pay just to help us out is, you know, less than the cost of a hamburger, less than $2 US to get the information. It's going to help you learn to just start off your coding just by learning some Visual Basic as your first language, because that's the easiest language to learn if you're starting programming. So a very small outlay and cost. And you know, why are we doing it? We're not going to be quitting our day job to become a YouTube star or anything like that. But you know, we've already done this with our Access course and found that, yeah, plenty of people, plenty of teachers are happy to just pay a little bit of money to buy the materials to use for their students. And that money just helps us buy, you know, better recording equipment for doing our videos and all sorts of things like that. Now, there's also full code listing for when you've got the final program finished. So if yours isn't working, you can compare it against the full code listing. Now, the full code listing is very long, and that's why we built and test this in small little steps, like going on Everest base camps to get up to the top of the mountain as we went along. So if we just show you I'll just show you the last bit, and don't be too scared by this, but here's the final code for the project. So you can see it's going to go for several pages. We've managed to put a lot of different things together there, but it's all modularized, and we did it all in little step-by-steps and tested it each step along the way, rather than just trying to, you know, like some machine, some coding machine like you see in those Hollywood movies, just typing in lines and lines of code. Oh yeah, the program's ready, let's run it now. So we've got the programming course now. We've got a website up and running, so you can go to Passie's World of ICT, and on the tabs there we've got our Microsoft Access course, but you're doing the programming course, so click on this programming tab up the top here on the website, and that will take you to the programming page. Or if you want the direct link, that is it there on this slide, and we'll also put that link in the YouTube video as well in the description. So yeah, you can go to the programming course and see that, and let's just quickly jump across to where that is here. No, that wasn't it. It was this one down here. All right, we've been going a long time. So that's the home page. You need to click on programming and go to there when we're interested in programming. And we also do Adobe Animate tutorials on our channel, but we don't get a lot of time for doing those. And okay, the program's decided to run really slow. Here we go, programming. So this is the programming course, and here are all the lessons. So these are the ones which there's been YouTube videos up for on our channel, but the lesson is kind of here as well. So if you want to go back to the case statement, which is a lesson we just did recently, case statement and combo boxes, yeah, kind of got an outline of the lesson here. That was just some of the things we covered in the lesson, just 3 slides there. And this is the overview showing everything that you will learn by doing that lesson, or if you're coming back to revise things. And there'll be an index in the YouTube video where you can go to that. So if you just wanted to say, look at how do we make a combo drop-down list, this one here, you go to the description in the video, find that, and go to the exact same spot. So there's the video there that we've got, and then here's the thing about buying resources. So look, you know, Australian $2.50 just to get all the stuff you need for a particular lesson, which would be the guide, the Word document of instructions, all the code and all that stuff. And you just do it by PayPal. If you're a teacher or an instructor, because you guys, you know, are really busy and wouldn't have as much time as I've spent into making these particular lessons, but you think, yeah, that'd be great for my students to learn validation and radio buttons and stuff like that. Just for like less than $4 US, about $5 Aussie, get a just the same materials, but you get a 30 computer license, so your whole class can be using those materials. You can give them to all 30 students in your class. All right, so that's there. That's just easily purchased securely online using PayPal, and that's the end of the sales plug. So let's close this video out because we are at 56 minutes at the moment. So look, thanks for watching. This has been a long, involved lesson. Remember, in the video description, we got that kind of that timeline index where you can click on different parts of the video. So if you just were thinking, oh yeah, I remember we made radio buttons back in that rectangle program video. So you might go to that on the YouTube channel, find it, then go into the description, and there should be a line in there which tells you how we made the radio buttons, and you could just go and watch that little 1 or 2 minutes of the video. We'd rather make one big video where we're actually doing something practical and meaningful than make a whole bunch of little kind of 5 or 10 minute videos how to do things. So it's kind of up to you to have the common sense to look in the description to find little individual things you need to look at later on. Or even better yet, just get the guides, because then you just got a hard copy and just quickly scroll through and find stuff without having to even worry about watching the video or anything like that. So look, thanks for watching. We hope your programming's going well. Programming is hard, really hard when the first time you're doing it, but after that it gets easier and easier. Think how hard it was when you first learnt riding your bike and you're kind of wobbling all over the place, you know, and falling off. Or on a skateboard, riding that guy, you know. It doesn't happen straight away, but then after you've been doing it a while, you think, wow, how could that have been so hard? Because now it's really easy. And that's what's going to happen. Like, you can learn Visual Basic, then you can go on to other languages, the more complicated ones like sort of C#, C++, JavaScript, Java, what is there? There's Ruby now. There's some new language called Julia. But start off with Visual Basic. It's a nice, easy one. It's kind of like training wheels on, so you can master the basics of, like you would on a bike, of steering and gears before you have to do anything too complicated. So stick with it and keep practicing, and you will have success. But just remember, it's not something that's just easily done straight away. Okay, so we're putting out videos every week. Like this video if you found it useful. Subscribe to our channel so that you get those weekly videos, and that's going to be us out. Thank you.